The small town of Brook Hollow sat tucked between rolling green hills and endless pine forests. Folks often said, "Nothing special ever happens around here." But for Emily Harper, everything had changed the day her father died. At just 10 years old, Emily had already learned how to stay quiet when teased, how to keep her head down when crossing the schoolyard, avoiding the stares and laughter. Her father, a firefighter, had lost his life in a wildfire more than a year ago. Since then, life had narrowed down to just her and her mother, living in a small, weathered house at the far end of Pine Grove Street, where the shingles were cracked and the wind slipped through the windows at night like soft sighs from the past. Her mother, Rachel Harper, worked as a nurse at the town clinic, always rushing, always tired, always trying to smile just enough so her daughter would believe everything was okay, even when she knew it wasn't. In that quiet world, all Emily had left was her frayed backpack, her father's old storybooks, and one small dream: to be seen by someone who truly noticed her. What she couldn't have known was that the moment her life would begin to change again wouldn't come from school or even home, but from a dog that emerged from the edge of the forest, with eyes full of wisdom and a heart full of loyalty. It happened on a Monday afternoon, just after school let out. Autumn had begun to settle in, the wind tossing dry leaves along the stone walkway outside Brook Hollow Elementary. Emily walked fast, her backpack slung awkwardly over one shoulder, doing her best to become invisible, just like every other day. But that day, Tyler Grant saw her. Tyler, 13, tall for his age, and the son of a powerful real estate developer, rarely went anywhere without his shadows, Mason and Brielle. They laughed at everything he said and followed him like loyal storm clouds. "Hey, Emily! Anybody order milk for the baby?" Tyler called out, holding up a cold bottle of chocolate milk fresh from the cafeteria. Before Emily could turn around, the liquid hit her like a slap. Cold and sticky, it poured over her hair, soaking her shirt, the one that used to belong to her dad. The scent of chocolate filled her nose and laughter filled the air. "Look at her! Maybe she needs a bottle and a burp, too!" Brielle shrieked, while Mason snickered behind his phone screen. Emily dropped to her knees, scrambling to pick up her scattered books, tears mixing with chocolate milk. She wanted to disappear. Then suddenly, a low, thunderous growl cut through the laughter. The bullies froze. Out of the alley beside the school emerged a large German shepherd. His thick black and tan coat bristled in the breeze, and his amber eyes locked onto the children like a seasoned sentinel. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. The message in his body language was crystal clear: back away. Tyler stepped back first. Brielle screamed and grabbed Mason's arm. Within seconds, they were gone, leaving behind only silence and a girl sitting in a puddle of milk and humiliation. Emily's heart pounded. She stared at the dog, soaked and stunned, but somehow safe. There was something in the way he looked at her, not fierce but knowing, as if he understood exactly what she needed. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. The dog approached, not fast, not threatening, then sat down a few feet away, his head slightly bowed, ears alert. That was the first time Emily met Shadow. On the northern edge of Brook Hollow, where pavement gave way to red dirt and pine needles, there stood an old wooden cabin nestled beneath towering evergreens. That was where Ezra Boone had spent most of his life, a retired forest ranger, widowed, childless, living quietly with only one true companion. Shadow wasn't just any dog. Ezra had raised him since he was just 8 weeks old, trained him with the wisdom of over 30 years in the deep woods. Shadow could navigate fog, distinguish unfamiliar scents, and even open the cabin door with his snout if Ezra ever took a fall. He wasn't just company, he was Ezra's remaining heartbeat. That afternoon, when Shadow didn't return on schedule, Ezra felt it deep in his gut. Something wasn't right. He strapped on his leather belt, pulled on his brown field coat, and followed the familiar paw prints pressed into the soft earth near the tree line. Near the school grounds, he saw a group of kids fleeing, pale and breathless. And then, at the far end of the yard, he saw Shadow. The dog sat beside a small girl, soaked in milk, eyes wide and wounded, yet safe beneath Shadow's silent watch. Ezra approached slowly. Shadow turned his head toward him, as if to say, "This one needed help." Moments later, Emily's mother, Rachel Harper, arrived after getting a call from the school about the bullying. She froze at the sight of the large dog and the weathered man standing quietly beside her daughter. "She's all right," Ezra said, his voice gravelly but kind. Shadow was there in time. Rachel looked from him to Emily, who was gently touching the dog's neck as though it was the only solid thing left in the world. "You're his owner?" "I am. His name's Shadow. I call him the only light I've had in the darkest part of my life." No one said anything else after that, but in Ezra's eyes something shifted, slow, quiet, certain, like a man realizing that maybe, just maybe, his world wasn't meant to stay empty forever. From that afternoon on, Shadow was no longer a stranger. No one asked him to, but the next morning he was already sitting at the gate of Emily's house, as if he had always belonged there. Emily stepped outside, backpack slung over her shoulders, still reeling from the events of the day before. But when she saw Shadow, she stopped. He sat tall, head slightly tilted, waiting, not impatiently, just there. "You waiting for me?" Emily whispered. Then hesitantly, she walked forward. Shadow stood up, not rushing, and fell into step beside her as if he had been doing so his entire life. From then on, every morning, Shadow walked Emily to school. Every afternoon, he waited at the corner right as the dismissal bell rang. No one trained him to do that. When asked, Ezra simply said, "If that's where he wants to go, I won't stop him." With Shadow by her side, Emily started to lift her head a little higher. The stares and whispers faded. Tyler and his crew stayed distant, casting furtive glances but never approaching. More importantly, Emily wasn't walking alone anymore. On those short walks between school and home, Emily started to talk, at first just murmured phrases, then full stories about her dad, about old memories, about the book he used to read to her at bedtime, and the tiny dreams of a girl who had once wanted to disappear. Shadow never answered, but he always listened. When she paused, he would glance back at her, ears perked, as if to say, "Go on, I'm here." On quiet Sunday afternoons, Ezra began inviting Emily and Rachel to his cabin. At first, Rachel hesitated, but soon she realized this wasn't just an old house in the woods. It was a haven, a place without sighs or ticking clocks. Ezra made mint tea. Rachel helped with simple dinners. Emily and Shadow wandered through the backyard, beneath the tallest maple tree in the county. Under that tree, Emily laughed out loud for the first time, really laughed, and the sound carried on the breeze, reaching Ezra's ears as he stood on the porch, heart stirring like an old bell ringing after years of silence. Each passing day wove the bond between girl and dog, thread by thread, not with words but with presence, with warmth, with trust that didn't need to be explained. On many nights after Emily had gone home and the cabin returned to silence, Ezra would sit alone in his old rocking chair, the amber lamp casting long shadows across the wooden walls. Shadow lay near the fireplace, head resting on his front paws, eyes half closed but never fully asleep, as if both of them, man and dog, held a piece of the past that never quite rested. Ezra once had a family. His wife, Marlene, the woman with soft gray hair and a laugh like wind chimes, had passed nearly 2 decades ago. Their only son, Ezra Jr., had died young. Since then, the cabin had become a shelter not just from storms, but from memory and grief. Shadow entered his life like a small flicker of light, a gift from a retired colleague, a German shepherd pup, trembling inside a cardboard box. Ezra trained him patiently, lovingly. Each trail they walked, every hand signal learned, became a thread stitching their hearts together. But there was something Ezra never knew, until recently. One morning, while changing the bedding in Shadow's corner, Ezra felt something hard under the blanket. He pulled it out, a photo old and worn at the edges. A young girl around 8 smiled on a porch. Brown hair, bright eyes, written on the back in fading ink. "Emily, my daughter, if I don't come back, take care of her. Lucas Harper." Ezra froze. That name, Lucas Harper, the firefighter who'd perished in the wildfire last year, the man the town still mourned, the one who vanished into the flames trying to save a trapped dog. Shadow. Ezra's breath caught. That night after the sirens, he had found Shadow collapsed outside the cabin, fur singed, eyes red. He'd assumed it was a miracle, nothing more. But now he understood. Lucas had given his life to save Shadow. And before vanishing into that inferno, he'd entrusted the dog with one last mission: protect his daughter. The photo proved it. And more than that, Shadow had been following Emily ever since, quietly, from the shadows, for nearly a year. Ezra looked at Shadow, who now stared up at him, not with sadness, but with fierce, unwavering loyalty. Ezra whispered, "So that's why you chose her?" The storm arrived on a mid-November night, not with roaring thunder at first, but with endless, persistent rain. The weather report had warned flash flood risk in low-lying areas, especially near Brook Hollow. But in a town used to calm, no one truly prepared. That morning, Rachel was called in for an emergency shift. Car accidents were piling up as roads began to flood. Emily was off school, but the supplemental program for older students still held sessions, including Tyler and a few others. Emily didn't want to go, but Rachel had said gently, "Just half a day, I'll pick you up before dinner." The rain grew heavier by the hour. By midday, water began creeping into the school's first floor. Teachers rushed students upstairs. The power cut out. Cell phones lost signal. Back at the cabin, Shadow, resting near the fireplace, suddenly stood up. He growled low, ears erect, eyes fixed toward town. Ezra paused, knife in hand mid-slice. "What is it, old boy?" But Shadow was already charging out the door, into the downpour, as if something in the air had spoken straight to his soul. Ezra didn't stop him. He just sighed, grabbed his coat, and followed. At the school, the situation worsened. Floodwater blocked exits. Emergency doors jammed. No one could contact help. A few students began to panic. In the corner of the second-floor library, Emily clutched her backpack, trembling as she stared through rain-soaked windows. Then, a bark, strong, familiar. Emily dashed into the hallway. At the far staircase, where water hadn't reached yet, Shadow appeared, soaked but alert. He barked once more, then turned and ran, clearly saying, "Follow me." "It's Shadow," Emily shouted. "He found a way out." The teacher and group of students followed her. Shadow led them down, past the main hall to a loading dock door, only waist-deep in water. Outside in the storm was the shape of a jeep, and Ezra tying ropes to the railing. "Over here, hurry," he called. Shadow didn't leave the students. He swam between them, nudging the younger ones toward Ezra. Tyler, the same boy who once mocked Emily, helped his classmates onto the jeep. Then Emily, stepping through the door, slipped. A scream cut through the rain. No one moved fast enough, except Shadow. He lunged into the current, gently clamping his teeth on the back of Emily's shirt, pulling her to the surface. Even in the murky floodwater, his eyes never left her. Ezra rushed forward, catching Emily as Shadow dragged her to the steps. He saved me," Emily gasped, wrapping her arms around Shadow's soaked neck. As the last group boarded the jeep, Shadow collapsed. His body shook, not from cold, but from exhaustion. Ezra knelt beside him, hand resting on his back. "You did good, old boy. Real good." After the rescue, Shadow was rushed to the small veterinary clinic in the center of town. Though he'd treated many wounded hunting dogs over the years, Dr. Weston, who had practiced for nearly 4 decades, couldn't hide the concern on his face as he examined the exhausted old shepherd. "He's pushed himself far past his limit," he told Ezra and Rachel as they sat together in the waiting room. "His heart's steady, but his kidneys are showing signs of strain, and there's an old injury to his right hip. That's definitely flared up again." Emily sat silently just outside the treatment room, clutching Shadow's collar in her hands. Her eyes were red and tired, but she refused to leave despite her mother's gentle urging. "I'll stay until Shadow's okay," she whispered. News of Shadow's actions spread quickly through Brook Hollow. Not just that he'd helped save an entire group of students from the flood, but that he had done so without command, without training prompts, because he somehow knew who needed help. 3 days later, during an emergency town meeting on disaster response, Mayor Mathers publicly honored Shadow. "There are heroes who speak loudly," he said, "and then there are those who speak only through what they do. Shadow is the latter." People who once called Ezra strange or reclusive began showing up at his cabin with homemade bread, warm soup, and words of gratitude. Even Tyler Grant and his mother came. Tyler, arm still in a sling, walked quietly to where Emily sat beside Shadow and bowed his head. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "for everything. He saved us. Even me." Emily looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "He'll forgive you," she replied, her eyes still fixed on Shadow. And Shadow, though tired, opened his eyes at the sound of Tyler's voice. His ears twitched gently, as if offering quiet acknowledgement. The day Shadow's V was removed, Ezra, Emily, and Rachel were all there. When he finally stood, unsteady but proud, his eyes bright again, Emily smiled through tears. "He's still my Shadow," she whispered. And somehow, all of Brook Hollow felt a little different too, because one dog had chosen love and never asked for anything in return. 1 week after Shadow began to recover, the sun returned to Brook Hollow. The last puddles faded from the streets, but in Emily's heart, the only thing that mattered was that her quiet hero could walk beside her again. That morning, Ezra had stood alone on the cabin porch, watching the sunrise filter through the pine trees. Shadow no longer waited at the door for him each morning. He waited for Emily. It was in that moment that Ezra knew. Shadow had already chosen where he belonged. That day, Ezra came to visit Rachel and Emily. He carried an old canvas bag and wore a look that was part peace, part gravity. Rachel welcomed him into the kitchen. Emily rushed to greet Shadow, who walked slowly by his side, still a bit stiff, but eyes bright and ears alert. "See that?" Ezra chuckled. "He wouldn't stay home, insisted on coming to see you." Emily hugged Shadow's neck. "I missed him every morning." After tea, as Emily played in the backyard with Shadow, Ezra sat quietly with Rachel. Through the kitchen window, they could see Emily running through the backyard with Shadow. She laughed freely, her hair flying in the breeze. Shadow chased her playfully. Leaping into the air, Rachel watched the scene with softened eyes. "They fit together," she murmured. Ezra nodded. Then he pulled the envelope from his coat pocket and set it gently on the table. "You already know what he's carried all this time," Ezra said softly. "Now it's time you carry each other." "Pickanar." Rachel opened the envelope. Inside was a small, slightly creased photograph, carefully preserved. Her brow furrowed as she realized it was Emily. On the back of the photo, there is a line written neatly in fountain pen. "Emily, my daughter, if I don't come back, take care of her. Lucas Harper." "I found this photo in Shadow's den, tucked under the bed," Ezra explained. He's been keeping it ever since he met her. Didn't chew it, didn't tear it, just hid it like something precious. Rachel said nothing, staring at the picture. Her fingers trembled. Shadow's never done that with anyone else before, Ezra continued. He chose Emily from the very first moment. He looked up, voice quieting. I once thought Shadow was life's last gift to me after I lost my wife and son. A friend gave him to me, back when I had nothing left worth waking up for. Rachel glanced at him, her expression full of understanding and gratitude. But now I think maybe Shadow wasn't the gift, he said with a faint smile. Maybe the gift was seeing him truly happy for the first time, playing with Emily like he did today. Outside, Emily looked toward the house. Mom, Mr. Ezra, does he want to stay for dinner? Rachel turned to him. Well, what do you say? Ezra looked out the window at Shadow's wagging tail and Emily's waving hand and nodded slowly. I think I'll stay a little while. 1 month after Shadow recovered, the sun returned to Brook Hollow. Emily could walk beside her dog again each morning. No more floodwater, no more cold. Just soft light, golden leaves, and the sound of Shadow's quiet paws on the road. That day, Ezra came to visit Rachel and Emily. He carried an old canvas bag and wore a look that was part peace, part gravity. After tea, as Emily played in the backyard with Shadow, Ezra sat quietly with Rachel. I've been thinking a lot these past few days, he began, voice low, about the future, about what we hold on to and what we're meant to let go. Rachel nodded, listening. Shadow's not just part of my life anymore, he said. He's chosen Emily, and if I love him the way I say I do, then the right thing is to let him stay with the one he's chosen. Rachel blinked. You want to give Shadow to Emily? Ezra nodded. Not just as a gift, but as the greatest thing I have left, given to a growing heart that still needs guarding. Rachel looked out the window where Emily was crouched, stroking Shadow like he was the whole world. Her eyes shimmered. The next day, Ezra returned, this time with a small wooden box and a carefully polished leather collar. Etched on the clasp was, Shadow, guardian of Emily Harper. This is my gift, he said, placing the box in Emily's hands. Because you brought back a piece of me I thought was gone. Emily opened it, breath catching at the sight of her name. But what about you? Ezra smiled. I'll be all right. I've got good memories, and sometimes that's more than enough. As dusk fell, Ezra stood up, adjusting his coat. All right, I should head home. You two take care of dinner. Shadow stood at the door, watching him. As Ezra stepped outside, Shadow quietly followed, not barking, not whining, just a short, loyal walk beside a friend who was leaving. Ezra turned, knelt beside him. You've got a new home now, he whispered, stroking Shadow's fur. And I've got peace knowing you'll never be alone. Don't look back, old friend. I'll be just fine, and I'll always find my way back to you. Shadow pressed his head gently into Ezra's palm, then slowly turned back. The door closed behind him, and he returned to Emily, his new friend, new home, and the next chapter of his life. From that day forward, Shadow officially lived with Emily. The little house on Pine Grove Street no longer felt so quiet. Every morning he waited at her bedroom door. Every evening he lay beside her desk while she studied. The town changed too. People who once overlooked Emily now greeted her by name. Tyler, still awkward, began showing up with treats for Shadow, or just to ask, "You doing okay today?" Ezra still lived in the cabin, but visited often, bringing wildflower honey, oatmeal cookies, and old ranger stories. He never called it visiting Shadow. He called it visiting family. One golden afternoon, as the sun lit the backyard in soft amber, Emily sat on the porch steps, Shadow's head resting in her lap. She stroked his neck, eyes quiet. "You know something, Shadow?" she whispered. "Maybe someone saved me by bringing you here. But you're the one who truly saved me." Shadow opened his eyes and looked at her, as if he understood it all. And for Emily, that was the first time she truly felt what her father had once told her. Family isn't just blood, it's whoever stays when everyone else walks away. That winter passed more gently than the ones before. In the small house at the end of Pine Grove Street, there were now quiet pause steps and the sound of Emily's laughter dancing through the afternoons. Ezra kept his promise. He visited every week, bringing blueberry jam, dry firewood, or simply old stories to share. Each time he arrived, Shadow would run to the gate, tail wagging like a child greeting a long-lost father. They were no longer three separate lives. They were a family, not by blood, but by love. Emily had changed. The once timid, quiet girl now walked through school halls with confidence. Sometimes she even stood up for others who couldn't do it themselves. When asked what had changed, she would just smile and glance at Shadow. "Because I know I'm never alone anymore." One afternoon in late spring, with sunlight streaming through the window in golden streaks, Emily sat at her desk, writing a few lines in her father's old journal. "I used to think my heart couldn't heal, but then a dog showed up and an old man too, and everything changed. I've learned that family doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be the place people return to and choose to stay." Shadow lay at her feet, breathing softly, eyes half closed. In the kitchen, Rachel washed dishes, and from the porch, familiar footsteps echoed. It was Ezra, carrying a basket of fresh-baked scones and a warm smile. In the end, Emily had found her home, not because of strong walls or a sturdy roof, but because someone had chosen to stay. And for Shadow, the loyal old dog, home wasn't a place. It was a heartbeat, a child's laughter, and the warmth of someone who needed him. And in that warmth, he was no longer just a dog. He was family.